Welcome to Cloud Dialogues. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And we're back for another episode of Cloud Dialogues. And we've got Georgia, as usual. We're back from a long weekend. Nice, relaxing long weekend, I think, for most people. Lots of food and chocolate, maybe, if you celebrate that. Otherwise, just lots of food, I guess. And we've got a special guest today,
Hello,
Amit
hello.
from
Nice to be
OpenOps.
here.
Hi,
Thank you
Amit. Say
for
hi.
having me.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very sunny.
From
Yeah,
from sunny
surprisingly
Prague?
so. Over 20
Is it
degrees
sunny?
during the day. Who would have thought?
Ugh, jealous.
Oh, really? Already? Yeah, it's been like that in Melbourne as well. That's about to start to get cold. I can feel it. So we're here for another episode. We're going to talk about automation, but first, go through some news items. George, we've got more chips.
Well,
We've got
I
more
mean,
AI chips.
so basically, Nvidia is obviously now that we're going to be very shortly in the tariff zone, right? The tariff zone, yeah, the
Yeah,
The
tariff era.
tariff
the
era.
tariff world, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I don't actually know what when are they actually implementing? Anyway, it's obviously companies like Nvidia are in a space where they're going to get hit quite hard by those tariffs, right? So customers are looking for alternatives. Hence, Huawei is apparently prepping a significant volume of AI chips to basically provide like China as an example, right? So just some kind of interesting market dynamics in terms of supply chain for AI as we, how do I put this? As we enter the tariff era, right? Like,
Yeah. You don't really hear much about Huawei's
well, I mean,
AI chips. I didn't
Huawei
know they had any. So
has
there you
been
go.
almost a little bit blacklisted from first world countries, right? So I think that's largely
Yeah, that's
why we
probably
don't
why.
hear a lot about them. But yeah, I guess perhaps, positive sign for them now that US companies are being hit with these tariffs. So, or their customers are being hit with these tariffs.
It's really interesting because to produce chips, you need huge amounts of capital investment. And I guess that means that the Chinese government will fund a lot of this because the market demand
Yes,
worldwide for
yes.
Chinese chips, as you said, is not so big. But yes, I guess the Chinese government has enough resources to fund basically the production of chips.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah, you
yeah,
admit
and
there'd
I
be
mean,
any
in
other
terms of like China's
competitors.
overall, I want to say AI strategy, because I don't know that they have strategy as a government, but they are heavily involved in terms of financial backing for different AI capabilities. So I guess it's not really surprising. As opposed to the US, which is
Yeah.
obviously very heavily
Well,
privatized.
watch this space. Yeah, that's true too. All right. Well, see what happens there. That'll be interesting. There's also Amazon. They've paused some data center lease talk. That's a little bit different.
So
It said, look, market
I
slowdown or something.
suspect that,
Where
so I
does it
know that
say where
because we
that is?
talked about Microsoft in this situation a couple of weeks back, they started pulling back recently as well. And I would suggest that that is driven by, I think if you are to look at the sort of use cases that we expect there to be demand for to provide like hyperscaler services, like microservices, whatever, you will find that we're moving to more niche models as organizations start to utilize AI and clean up their data. I think a lot of organizations are in that learning journey of they've gone and implemented some AI capability and then they realized their data governance was bad and that was driving a lot of problems, right? I feel like a lot of organizations are starting to clear that up. They're starting to get smarter and they're starting to do more things like model distillation because there is this awareness that if we use LLMs for everything, it's not the right solution, but also it's just like massively expensive, right? From a compute perspective. So it wouldn't surprise me if their modeling was starting to reveal those sorts of trends. And that's why they have started to pull back, because they would already have a significant pipeline of build in terms of like, they would know I would imagine for the next few years, they would have quite solid plans about what data centers are going where. But then I think also there probably are questions about power as well, right? We probably are at a point where we're at a bit of saturation, and perhaps there's some maybe, in order to increase planning down the pipeline of data center builds, there probably needs to be some activity around like power providers. Like I think this is the conversation that's coming to a head as well. It's like, how do we manage this better? Because there's only so much HV network access to go around.
Actually, I think that's one of the main causes, because I heard a few talks by Scott Guthrie, which is number 2 at Microsoft, the one in charge of cloud and enterprise workloads, and CTO of NVIDIA. And I think the main problem they're concerned with is power. Like, how do they get power to power all the NVIDIA chips, to power all the Microsoft data centers? And that's been a theme for, I think, the last decade at least. Like, and now it's reached a fluctuation point where it's just, with AI, it's just over the limit. Like, really, capacity isn't there. It needs to be changed.
Totally. Yeah. And
I wonder if this means that they'll deploy, just a quick one, I wonder if this means that if they'll deploy less Intel and AMD chips and more of the more power efficient Graviton, maybe. Yeah, maybe they'll switch it a little bit to give them more power.
I mean, that's probably something that they're grappling with a little bit as well, right? Is how can they balance like the marketing of their products into a market where there's just not infinite power, right? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how I think also the challenge of, and probably something that's becoming an increasing risk and concern, is if we have these massive scale data centers running on HV power, what happens if one of them goes offline? Because that's going to significantly impact the grid, right? You have to balance the grid. You have to sit around 50 megawatts, right? So even if you deviate from that significantly, you're going to start taking areas offline. You're going to have to start taking areas offline in order to balance things. So that's probably becoming an increasing concern as well, right?
Yeah, as far as I heard, again, from what executives of these companies are speaking about, some are even thinking of rebuilding data centers together with like nuclear power plants next to them, and having these kind of solutions where the power supply is just immediately there. I think that's the world we're going for. Like, this is the way that these companies will use to catch up with the electricity consumption, power consumption.
Yeah, totally. I would say as well, though, that the issue of high needs and balancing the grid, this is not a new issue. Like, this is something that is continually evolving every day, right? Like every day, the organizations that manage the grid are receiving new requests for significant supply or demand. So this is like a technology problem that these organizations have been grappling with for a long time. I think it just brings a new dimension and maybe like a new level of risk.
For sure.
Yep. And probably a new level of urgency too.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that pressure.
No, but they'll probably, as AWS seem to do, probably a bit more than Microsoft. They're very innovative when they build data centers, so I'm sure they're looking at how.
Oh, totally. And we've seen that. We've seen, continually increasing investment into other power sources. I guess it just takes a bit of time for all this technology to catch up, and this has probably come at us quite quickly as well. I would imagine perhaps some of the planning that the hyperscalers had in the pipeline in terms of data center build maybe is not going to deliver to their needs anymore as well. So maybe they're in the process of like replanning some of that, because obviously you can't just build data centers that have significant AI requirement as if they didn't, right? Because they need significantly more cooling. Like you can't retrofit old data centers. Well, not really, not effectively, not efficiently. You can't retrofit old data centers with new cooling. It just doesn't work like that, right? It's a completely different design.
Yeah. Slow news week. Obviously, it was Easter, but we do have the final item, which is a robot one, which George likes robots. This is a robot runner. I'm not sure I see the point in this actually.
You know what I found funny?
In
You know what I
China.
found funny as well?
21
It says that the
humanoid robots
robots were
join.
accompanied, this is reported by Reuters, by the way. The
What?
robots were accompanied by human trainers, some of whom had to physically support the machines during the race. What does that mean? Like, what does that do? Does that mean they were carrying them across the line?
Don't
Like, surely
fall
that
over.
doesn't meet the brief, right? Come on.
Maybe helping them get up or something. They fell.
Seriously. I thought that was quite funny. That laugh made me line. That laugh made
Oh, it's a
that
half
line made me
marathon.
laugh.
Okay.
That line made me laugh.
21 kilometers.
Oh dear. See, I'm tired as well. The winning robot was from the Beijing Innovation Center of Human Robotics with a time of 2 hours and 40 minutes. So.
Yeah. More than twice the men's race winner. So obviously they're not going to beat the humans, but anytime soon. But no, they haven't given 10 years. Maybe they will.
Sure.
But again,
It's
what's
all
the point?
about the shape of
It's
the
about
robot,
human
right? Like
endurance,
if the
isn't it?
robot is shaped like an autonomous vehicle, which is essentially a robot as well, well, it'll probably beat a human.
That's right. The men's winner was 1 hour, so 1 hour, 2 minutes. That's like pretty
Incredibly fast.
God, I do like 5 kilometers in like half an hour. On a good day. On a good day. On a good
On a
day.
good day, I'd probably do that. That's pretty decent. That's pretty decent for a casual runner.
Whenever
I
my
shouldn't know
knee's not
casual runner.
a mess.
Cool. All right. Yes. So that's the end of the news. And now we'll switch gears a little bit to cloud automation. Well, actually, let's just say automation, because we still have hybrid environments with data centers, don't we? I know a lot of organizations do, but we have which are historically non-automatable. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Amit, but then we have the cloud environments, which are historically always been automatable. And that's always been the challenge, right?
Thank you.
What's your background, Amit?
Thanks for
Welcome to
having
the
me.
show.
Definitely. So nice to meet you all. In
No
terms of
worries.
my background, I definitely come from software engineering. I started my way at Microsoft a bit before Satya Nadella came in and shifted the entire organization to look at the cloud. So in that sense, I was lucky to have seen a few on-prem products in my life as well as a software engineer, and then working on shifting everything to the cloud and being involved in building the first Azure services. At that time, also, I ran into incredible scale that kind of forced us to use automation. Just as an example, on one of the products we were working on, we were running on about $40 million a month in Azure. And yeah, that's Microsoft scale for you. So
Wow.
obviously everything had to be automated, right? Like you can't do anything manually with this amount of resources. So that's also where I started getting into cloud governance and automation, etc. And after that, after my time at Microsoft, I worked at a few cybersecurity firms and built cybersecurity products. And that's where I moved into more the management side of my career, team lead, engineering manager, VP R&D, etc. Was lucky enough to also be involved in autonomous vehicle startups. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, throughout my career, I think I just love technology. I just love the cloud. I just love to think of how to build things better. That's also what prompted me into starting OpenOps and focusing on automation and on building products to make automation great again, let's say.
Love that.
Yeah.
I think
always
it's
been
just the
great.
way that people are using
Automation's
it has
always
not
been
been
great.
great.
But it's challenging, right? Because
Yeah, like everything, you need skill to build
Or
things,
not
you need
using it right.
knowledge. And, well, oftentimes there are challenges like even communication and organizational challenges. And I think that's what we try to cover here a bit in this episode.
so cloud operation, how do you like to think about cloud operations? And do you see it? How do you see it going well and how do you see it going wrong? I mean, I think we've all
Yes, definitely. And
both
I
sides
think
of the coin there.
when companies or product teams just start their journey, it really depends on the level of knowledge they are coming into this journey with. Who are doing this for the second or third time, moving workloads to the cloud, will obviously have more experience and will be able to plan and build their cloud operations really well from the get-go. And others who don't will run into problems which will force them into building cloud operations. Whether it's counting on developers to be the SREs, which will then, if not designed properly, will make people's life very hard because of needing to respond to incidents all the time. And whether it's catching problems in FinOps or SecOps, like there are so many things that can go wrong when you're engineering without the knowledge on how to build it properly. So I think it's an evolution, and ideally, like if you have a skilled and knowledgeable team, then they will um, think about how they will run their cloud operations from the early stages already.
Amit, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was I feel like automation, like when I talk to executives about cloud, it's not something that they kind of started asking me about until recently. Do you think that that's just because of the scale of the types of cloud environments that we're now running, or do you think there's other drivers behind that?
Yeah. So I think if you think of the evolution of cloud over the years, definitely automation is a second order problem, right? The first order problem is having visibility. And that comes across the board. Like when we started moving to the cloud, the main concern was security. I don't know if people even remember it today, but there was a true fear of moving things from on-prem to the cloud for security reasons. And that's why the first thing that everyone did was build security products, build security services, and start to build their security practice. And that started with visibility, right? We first had to detect the issues. But then in security, we reached a point where we have just too many notifications and too many alerts, and we can't handle them. And then security automation came in, and we saw this category of products come into the market. And now, in a sense, we're seeing the next phase where cloud workloads have become so significant that security is not the only issue. Like you have data ops and you have FinOps, the financial efficiency of running the cloud, and you have compliance ops to make sure everything stays compliant all the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And similarly to security, all of these different disciplines also started with visibility, and now you see FinOps, for example. This is a subject we deal with it a lot because all our capabilities are mostly in the field of FinOps. And you see that there as well. Now visibility has become commoditized. There are plenty of solutions for it in the market. And now enough companies have matured to the level that automation became incredibly important. So yeah, I think it's definitely a journey, and I think it's the maturity levels are varying between disciplines. So for example, the security market is much, much, much more mature than the SRE market or the FinOps market. But as markets mature, they move from only doing the visibility to understanding, well, visibility is just not enough. We now need to run operations based on the visibility we have. And that's what we are seeing in the market.
One of the challenges I've seen is when people do lift and shift, which obviously is usually the first step in the cloud for many organizations. That's a little bit of a hard one to automate because, especially if you're lift and shifting something that's not really automated, and then now it's in the cloud, how do you retrofit the automation into it? There's obviously different ways to do it, but
Yes,
what have you seen in that sort of area?
lift and shift, I think it became notorious for companies who are just migrating their workloads to the cloud without architecting them, etc. I think it's a great first step. The main problem is that just sometimes companies stop there. But definitely, if you're on the cloud journey, arguably a good way to start is to just do a naive lift and shift, running all your workloads instead of on machines on-prem, in a data center, running them on AWS EC2s or Azure VMs or whatnot. But then definitely immediately there, I would start automating, because what we see almost always is that when you do that, for example, you have a lot of workloads that could be right-sized. And you're now discovering that actually your utilization is not what you thought it is. Then that's the first point where I would start automating. I would start getting some tools to discover what needs to be right-sized and then building the operations around right-sizing that. And that can be massive. If you just moved, I don't know, let's take a company as an example, Vodafone's entire data center into the cloud, you're probably going to deal with hundreds of thousands of issues there. And for that, you're going to want to automate solutions to these problems and make sure that you don't only do that once, you also keep it as guardrails for what follows. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Continuous learning journey.
Yes. And of course,
And experience as well.
sometimes the solution is just to
Gaining
re-architect,
experience.
not to do the automation on current architecture. I can say that some things in the cloud are amazing. I always think of the example where we were like in one of my the companies that I worked with, we were a group of around 30 engineers, and we had like tens of builds a day, and we moved from an architecture where we had like build servers to an architecture where serverless containers would come up, build, and then go down. And that moved our cost. I remembered the number because it was so ridiculous. Like, again, dozens of builds a day. Our monthly build for these containers was something around $17. Like, it was that ridiculous. Like, it was that efficient because like just the fact that it was only there for when the build happens, and builds are something that happens quite sparsely. It was just incredibly efficient. I couldn't believe when I saw the bill. Like, are we paying for our entire group's bills? We're paying just $17 for that. It's incredible. Yeah. So definitely, sometimes you definitely want to re-architect as well, and not only automate, solving the problems with your own existing architecture.
Yeah, the automation around financial incentives around automation is obviously one of the highest, right? It'll pay for itself a lot of the time. But then sometimes things can go wrong and you'll be paying a price. So there's a bit of a fine balance there, right? One of the organizations I've worked for had a very conservative risk appetite. So they wouldn't allow certain automations unless it was proven. So what are some best practices you've seen around that? Because automation
Yeah,
going
so
wrong
definitely,
is probably worse than
I
no
think
automation at all.
Natalie Daly from Just Being C said it in the last FinOps Hacks. Automation has to match the risk appetite of the organization. There's no way around it. Like, you are never going to build the same automations in production environment as you're going to build, for example, in dev environments, which have way less of a risk. So definitely risk is something to consider. The price of anything going wrong is something to consider. However, you do need to weigh in both sides, like the risk to value. Because, for example, let's take an extreme example. In dev environments, right? What is the risk? That some developer will get slightly delayed? Yes, it's a risk. Like, if it happens consistently, it's a risk, but but we're not going to lose business over it. right? It's not gonna shut down our entire company's services. So definitely, and that is not only applied to dev versus prod, like it can also be applied to upgrading disks, which is an operation with zero downtime, or are we doing a right sizing that requires shutting down everything and restarting it and therefore requires downtime? So definitely I would look at risk at everything we do, but from a perspective of how to build it correctly. And I think like the biggest thing that companies are missing today is especially to think about it as a yes no question or black and white question, because what we see a lot, and the automations that I've built in past often has been to collect data, enrich data, and bring it to the right person that can do something about it. That's also an automation, right? So I often don't like blanket approach saying like, no, we're not gonna get into automation because it's too risky. No, automation can include a human in the loop. And automation can include approvals. Automation can include many other things that you should consider as well. If the risk level is high, then yes, then include an approval and a human in the loop in it. It's incredibly reasonable to do so.
I've never even heard that term before.
Do you touch
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
human in the
I don't
loop?
think I've ever heard that term before.
It's actually not
Yeah?
that common, but
Yeah,
it's becoming
for
more
me,
common now, I think. Human in the loop. Yeah. Like a code approvals.
maybe for me it's way
for
too
example.
natural, because actually one of the things that my previous company, I was working in a company that created a human in the loop for autonomous vehicles. So it was exactly when the autonomous vehicle fails, the ability to take over with a human in a remote control center and help the vehicle resolve the problem. So I'm very much used to this term and I use it casually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. I don't think I've ever heard that term before. I think I've maybe seen the acronym before on LinkedIn, but I don't think I've ever actually heard anybody use it.
Yeah, good point. Maybe for me it's too natural because of my work history and because I did literally a system for human in the loop. But yeah, good. Interesting. Never thought of the fact that this can be a not so common term. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe it's becoming more common with AI and machine learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm hearing about it
Yeah, I think
now.
so.
Yes, for sure. That was like in the previous company that we built, that was the thesis. Autonomous vehicles are too critical of a system to never have a human in the loop at all. And therefore, we need to find a way to put the human in the loop. And now I think the world is becoming autonomous, right? And then we need to remind ourselves that in some cases, we need to keep the human in the loop, and especially when the risk is too big. And I think like for companies, the risk in the cloud, the risk of things going wrong is quite big. And therefore, there you can probably find similarities to the autonomous vehicle market with physical cars driving in the roads, which obviously has incredible risk as well.
Yeah, sometimes it's the easiest risk mitigation, right? Whack a human in the loop. Because I mean, humans are expensive, but it obviously depends on the risk that you're trying to mitigate. But you did touch on another reason for automation, not just financial, but security. Well, you touched on collecting artifacts in security. That's a key one, right? Automating artifact collection for compliance and things like that. So we were talking about risk. What about, obviously we talked about when we start automating, you always hear the term low hanging fruit, high risk, and then some things that aren't worth automating. How do you find that balance? When is something worth automating and when is it not, do you think? Or is it always worth automating everything? I mean, sometimes there is that argument as well.
Yeah, so
Because
definitely
how something is configured, right?
automation is not the first step. The first step, typically, to even understand what you want to automate, you need to start by doing some things manually. And I think like automation comes in when things don't work anymore, or at least you see projection and to not automating, creating major problems for the organization. Or by the way, like just bad quality of life for the people working at the company. So, for example, and let's take, we can choose whether SecOps or FinOps or which CloudOps discipline we want to choose. When you think about the amount of issues becoming huge, and you try to do that manually, and most companies do that. They start with a security analysts or FinOps analysts analyzing the data, working on the issues, and then coming to engineering managers with lists of issues that they are asking them to resolve. And then the engineering managers go probably to their architects or tech leads and ask them to go through the list. And that comes back to the analyst. And that cycle quickly becomes very, very inefficient. Like, and everyone starts to see it doesn't work. And it even, not only does it scrape the tip of the iceberg in terms of like actually resolving the issues, it also creates conflicts in our organization. Like people start to get annoyed because they do manual work, they miss certain things, and then the analyst, for example, asks about a certain issue that was already should have been dismissed already. They ask about it like 4 times, and the engineering manager gets upset, or vice versa. The analyst comes in a review and presents like this department has a lot of issues, and then the manager says like, no, we checked it was false positive, etc. And no one has the data. And then with the lack of data, the lack of everything going through humans just talking to each other and opening tickets manually, etc., then that creates conflicts and that hinders everything. And then that's a good sign that you should start automating things. After you've tried to do it manually, you see it then doesn't scale, you see it creates conflicts, you see it doesn't work, creates a bad culture, or it's just unsustainable and you can't get the task done, then usually you go into automation. And so you definitely shouldn't jump in there too early, but I think like with the amount of issues we see detected by all the amazing visibility systems in the market for different disciplines, we're deep down that road in most organizations already.
Yeah. One of the things that I find, especially when I'm using a new cloud service, the automation, a lot of the time, the terminology until you've actually gone through it. ClickOps, another term that some people don't know about. ClickOps your way through it to understand it, and then it makes sense. And then
yeah, for sure. I mean,
I do that.
I wouldn't even with the most common and basic forms of automation, like for example, building your entire cloud environment as infrastructure as code. I would definitely start ClickOps first. I would start with like understanding AWS or Azure services I want to use, building something basic, and then build the infrastructure as code to automate the deployment of it, etc. But I wouldn't do it from day one when I don't even have an idea of like the services I want to use and how would everything play out together.
I was talking to one of my engineers the other day. We were talking about ClickOps, and he was saying like, "You're going to forget how to code," and I was like, "Oh, that's fine. I never knew in the first place."
But now everyone knows. Yeah, vibe coding, really funny.
Well, we'll have vibe ClickOps.
Actually, I didn't think about it. You know?
You
What does
almost
that
can do
mean?
that with an MCP
I mean,
server, right?
completely though.
You can
No,
do that.
I imagine probably OpenAI operator and the similar solutions. I mean, yes, you could put them on the AWS console and ask them to build an application architecture for you, right? And you can have like, yeah, vibe cloud architecture. That could be.
It was just going to be a disaster.
That's right. Actually, it might be better than what some people build from something Ops thing. But I mean, you can do that today. Actually, I wonder if someone's done that.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious. Anyway,
No, that's another form of automation. Right? Letting
he's a fun
an
one.
AI agent build your entire cloud architecture and hope for the best.
So I've got a fun one here. What's a hidden win in automation that you think people
Yeah,
might
so I
underestimate
think
or don't think about?
I think people don't necessarily understand the consequences of not automating their cloud operations. And I think the consequences are astonishing. And I'll pull up two stats here. One is from the security space. I think it was either IDC or Gartner that estimated that cybersecurity financial damage is going to cost $10 trillion worldwide in the next 2 to 3 years. And so think about that number for a second, like $10 trillion of cybersecurity damages worldwide. It's an unperceivable amount. Yeah, it's a big number. Now, match that with another stat. 60%, more than 60% of attacks on organizations are based on vulnerability that the organization has already detected. Okay. Meaning the organization, 60% of attacks worldwide are based on vulnerability that the organization had visibility on, but didn't solve. That's how you can start to think about the cost of not automating. Like, actually, the majority of attacks in the world today, which lead to astonishing financial damages, are based on just our lack of ability to move from having visibility on issues to actually running the operations of remediating. And in FinOps, it's quite similar as well. Like the Gartner estimate that around 30% of cloud workloads are wasteful, are just low-hanging fruit that can be cleared out. And in my experience, if you come to an organization which hasn't invested in automation at all, the likely number is even greater than can be 40 or 50 or even in some cases 80% of wasteful workloads. And when you think of everything in the world becoming software, and if you take a general sense of software, so you take cloud and SaaS and on-prem IT, etc., everything that software runs on, you also reach trillions of dollars. And then having double digits percentage of that being wasteful, that's already like an impact on your margins. And so that's how I think of what people don't see when they think of automation. What people don't notice is the significance of not being able to resolve all the issues and run your operations smooth. Like it's just mind blowing when you think of the numbers. So that's usually how I like to think about and how I like to think of prioritizing or justifying to executives, for example.
Yeah, the security is a good one because there's so much security tooling around to help you identify these problems before they become serious issues. And yeah, some of that tooling is expensive, but you pay what you can afford to pay, really. And all of it gives you similar types of visibility.
And then you discover that visibility is just enough. Like it's great that you know about problems, but if you haven't really resolved them, then you're still exposed. Like
that's a different problem. And exactly.
Then the number of issues is such that it doesn't scale to solve everything manually. So yeah, definitely.
Indeed. Edit point. We're at about 45 minutes. Do we want to jump to where automation's headed, maybe?
Yeah, should we just quickly do that and then close?
I think we have to talk a bit about
policies.
AI and where is the world going in that sense, etc.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's all great talking about how we do automation today. What does the future of automation?
Well, obviously we can't ignore AI coming into our lives, right? And I think there's definitely a sense that AI can be extremely useful in building automation. And then you see predictions like they're on a spectrum, right? Between like AI will do everything. We will have AI running, making all the decisions for us. We will be completely redundant. Personally, I don't believe that this day is near us. Maybe in 30 years, 25 years, but definitely not in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that some organizations, especially if you think of financial institutions, healthcare companies, like we can't, in the context of cloud, we can't have AI running and changing configurations, etc., because decisions need to be auditable, explainable, and AI is just not there yet. Like it's not. Maybe in 30 years, again, it'll be fully explainable and we will know how each decision was made, but definitely that's not the situation today. So I think like in places where the risk is too great and environments are regulated, actually what we talked about before, human in the loop is going to become increasingly important. And I think that the approach of the human as like a curator, like a museum curator for automations is going to be the one that wins. So a human will know what they are looking for. They will ask the AI to build it, but then they will still review it and take accountability for it before applying it to the cloud environments. And that's how I imagine the world being built, or AI affecting cloud automation in the enterprise setting. Now, early adopters might try to also apply that more aggressively, like startups and SMEs, SMBs might try to apply AI to really sort of vibe architect their cloud environments, as we use this term. I just don't know if AI is going to be good enough for that, or is it going to cause huge amounts of problems? Probably both. Like probably in the next few years, we will see this causing a lot of problems, and maybe at some point AI will mature to the point where it is actually good at that. It's very hard to tell. Like if we look at I think the autonomous vehicle market is a very good analogy. Like it has improved in safety incredibly over the years, and still we don't see autonomous vehicles everywhere, right? Like, so it's a very, very, very long journey um, to replace the human in control, even when the technology is somewhat there. And I think, like in terms of the maturity of the AI market right now, the AI right now is not mature enough to architect on its own a way that's actually safe. So humans will keep being incredibly important in being the ones that curate the automations, in being the ones that apply the operation, that apply the automations, and possibly a lot of the automations will still contain the loop in cases.
Yeah, with AI, there'll be a lot of need for automation.
It's solving one part of the equation, which is making it much easier to build automations. Like, so definitely it can accelerate automation. It will completely democratize, right, ability to build, to engineer, to run automations, etc. So definitely it can increase the uptake for automation just because of the fact that it will be much easier to build automations. What do you guys
like
think?
the comparison with autonomous vehicles. I think that's an interesting question. I was talking to one of my friends the other day. He spent £20,000 on a robot, and it was adamant that there was something in front of it. It was like, he sent me a video. He was adamant there was something in front of it. It was like, I had like obstacle detection turned on. It was like, there's something in front of me. I can't go that way. And he was like, no, there's not anything in front of you. And the support people were like, yeah, we don't know what's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the kind of cases
easy, right?
That's exactly the kind of cases we handled like in previous company with the remote operations for autonomous vehicles, because sometimes they see an orange cone, which you think they would be trained on at passing, and they just don't get how to pass it. And you need to tell them, you need to design the routes for them, or do something to help.
I mean, it's like automation in a sense, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's like you come up to the pothole in the road and you kind of fall into it a few times before you figure out how to go around.
Yeah. That's, or you are defensive and then you stop for anything, like that your friend's robot, right? Like it identified something. Maybe it was like a 55% chance that there is an obstacle in front of it based on the AI, And then the safest thing to do is just to stop. And I think that's really what we're going to see in the cloud as well. Like, they will try until some point, but safety will be so important that it will just stop all the time. So human operators are still incredibly important. They will just be more productive and will be able to do more.
Indeed. Do you want to give a shout out? Thanks for coming on. Do you want to give a shout out to any open source projects?
Yes,
Can I think of any?
I
I
can
can't
say
think of
for
any.
people automating.
Yes, so definitely check our GitHub. We just released our entire code base almost our entire code base is open source. And we're building a system for no-code workflow automation for CloudOps, specifically now specializing in FinOps. We will expand to other disciplines as well in the future. So yeah, definitely check our GitHub, OpenOps-cloud-OpenOps, or just Google GitHub OpenOps in Google and you'll find it. And definitely, I hope it's useful. I will give compliments to there are other great projects out there, like, for example, like Cloud Custodian is an amazing one. InfraCost is an amazing project. Yeah, so
Yeah,
there are
Insta's
definitely
amazing.
some
That's
good open source projects out there, and I love this world of open source, and I love to build with open source. I've done that a lot in my past, so glad to be able to contribute a bit to the community as well as part of our company.
Amit. Have you got an event or something coming up this week?
Yes, so we're going to be in London for AWS Summit and for a few just regular meetings that we have there. So myself and Lee Wagner, which is from our go-to-market team, will be there, and they are welcome to us.
Awesome. I will also be there, hopefully. We'll see how we go. As long as the rail train doesn't come off the rails. All my other stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you're in London, there you go. There's a bit of an advert for AWS
Come and hang
Summit.
with us.
That's the 30th, I think, 30th of April.
Yes, for sure.
Out in the east. So thank you for being on, Amit. Appreciate
Thank you,
your
Matt and
insights
Georgia,
on
for having me.
automation.
It was
No,
a
thank
fun
you.
conversation.
We'll put all the
And-
links in the comments for everybody.
Yep. And we appreciate your listeners and your feedback. Please send it to us and give us a like and share with your friends, please. If you like this episode, just let us know. And until next
Bye-bye.
time, goodbye.
Bye-bye.